What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Believe in White Sox here on a Sunday morning. This is going to be the only episode that we record until next weekend because I'm going back to California, and yes, I know it's been over a month since we've actually had a show, but we are thick into spring training. We are in the midst of injuries and transactions in spring training and seeing what is going to come about when the White Sox break camp and release their opening day roster. And opening day is going to be very, very soon upon us because spring training does not have that much longer left to go, and the White Sox, in 12 days' time, will be headed to Milwaukee, where they will open up the 2026 season at the Brewers. So there's a part of me that wants to go up there for that game. It's the Brewers home opener. I think that a team that just won the NL Central and made it the NLCS, it's going to have a good crowd. I haven't been to a Brewers game in over 10 years at this point. So that could be a lot of fun. And the White Sox go to Miami, and then they open up at home against the Blue Jays on April 2nd. That's the home opener. I am planning to be out at Rate Field for that one. So when we look at what the White Sox are in spring training, we have to evaluate holistically, and we have to take some of these numbers for what they are and take the injuries for what they are, because at the end of the day, I am always of the belief that those who are on the inside have a much better idea of player performance than us on the outside. We can't necessarily just look at what some of these guys are doing and say, based on specific numbers and a small sample size, that, oh, hey, this guy should make the team or this guy shouldn't. But at the same time, injuries sometimes force the hand of roster construction. And that's exactly what we might be dealing with when it comes to the White Sox catching situation. And that is because a few days ago in the World Baseball Classic, Kyle Teel, playing for Team Italy, hurt his hamstring rounding first base, and it appears that his injury is going to be longer than initially thought. The White Sox website says that, based upon what's being reported, that he won't be back for 4 to 6 weeks, and that injury occurred on March 10th. So it's officially stated here on the White Sox website that he's going to open up the season on the injured list, which means that Edgar Caro is going to be your primary catcher to start the year, and Corey Lee, somehow, some way, has survived his way onto another White Sox opening day roster, and he will be the backup catcher to begin the year. So this is really unfortunate because I thought that Kyle Teel was somebody that was going to make a big jump in year two, and he still could have a jump in year two, but this is not how you want somebody that is a cornerstone of your future, or at least somebody you think is going to be a cornerstone of your future, to start the year. It just simply is not the ideal way to have somebody that you expect to be a huge part of your year end up like this. And it's unfortunate, but the White Sox are just going to have to make do. And, the fact that he was on the Team Italy roster says a lot about, what people think of him beyond just his prospect status. And, again, it's spring training, but in a small sample size, Corey Lee has been good. And I think that this might be an opportunity for Corey Lee to, number one, prove himself to a point where somebody might want to trade for him, and he will have some value on the open market, because I don't think he is going to be this team's future. He's just not. He's not going to be this team's future at catcher. So the injury somewhat opens up an opportunity for him, but at the same time, maybe it shows the White Sox that Kyle Teel might be more valuable, as I've said, in a first base position at times, in an outfield position at times, and not be the primary catcher. Be somebody who is in the lineup every day, but isn't necessarily behind the dish every day. because you look at the two guys, and Kyle Teel is way more athletic. He's not a catcher's body. He's somebody that is, I think, an outfielder's body playing catcher. So I'm hoping that this Kyle Teel injury doesn't stunt his second season in the big leagues, but for now, Edgar Caro is going to be your opening day catcher. And I got no problem with that, and I hope that when he is asked to be in the lineup, that Corey Lee is productive while he is in said lineup. The next injury that is worth talking about is the one to Brooks Baldwin, and he has right elbow soreness, and he hasn't played in a spring training game since March 6th, and he had imaging done on March 10th with, apparently, according to manager Will Venable, something showing up in there. He is day-to-day at this point, and I don't necessarily know what that means for his status, but it's worth noting that for a White Sox outfield that's seemingly open in terms of guys that could or could not potentially make the roster, it opens up more opportunities for other guys to potentially make the roster. So I didn't think that Brooks Baldwin would be a starting outfielder at this point, but he's certainly somebody that you expected to be that super utility guy, the guy that could come in and play every infield position, play every outfield position if it's asked of him, and maybe that opens up an opportunity for somebody else. Other injuries of note that the White Sox are going to have to deal with, and Wickelman Gonzalez is day-to-day with tightness in his lower back. Kai Bush was put on the 60-day IL earlier in spring training, and it sounds like he's just there because it makes sure that he doesn't take up a 40-man roster spot. So his return is going to be a lot later than I think we initially thought. Drew Thorpe, though, is expected to return sooner. He threw a pair of 20-pitch all-fastball bullpens, with the latest one coming on March 6th, and it sounds like he's had some tendinitis that's kept him sidelined for a little bit, but it sounds like he's starting to round back into form. But the biggest one, at least in terms of the White Sox in the now, is that Mike Vassell had right elbow soreness and left his start on Saturday after throwing a pitch with 2 outs in the 4th inning. So he's going to undergo further examination, and if Mike Vassell is going to have to start the season on the IL, then that really throws into flux a lot of what you were hoping to do with some of your pitching. And I thought that Mike Vassell, at least based on how he was being used in spring training, that he was going to end up being potentially a piece in the rotation. I always thought that he had the kind of stuff to where you could make him a starter. But then again, he's somebody that can fill that swingman role. And if the White Sox felt good about him enough to the point where they wanted him to be a full-time starter, they probably could stretch him out into being a full-time starter, but it does not seem that that's going to be the case. And now, if Mike Vassell's out for a long period of time, that's one of your most versatile pitching pieces that you are going to be without. And Mike Vassell was one of the biggest revelations of last year's White Sox, and if they don't have him to start the year, I think that that is a really, really unfortunate development, and hopefully this injury is not more serious. So, checking in on some of the White Sox pitching stats during spring training, Shane Smith has not been good, and that's concerning to me because this is somebody that was by far and away your best starter last year, a Rule 5 pick that excelled from the start, and granted, it's spring training, but in 7 1/3 innings, he has allowed 9 runs on 9 hits. He's given up 2 homers. He's hit 2 batters. He's walked 6 guys. And he's going to be in the rotation to start the year, but his performance at this point is extremely concerning. And I would not imagine that given some of the veterans that the White Sox did sign in the offseason, that if his performance continues the way it is, that he'll be the opening day starter. He might end up being as the 4 or the 5 guy in the rotation. Then you look at some of the other White Sox acquisitions so far. Chris Murphy has been really good out of the bullpen. 10 innings. He's allowed 3 earned runs. He's struck out 11 and walked just 2. Hasn't given up a homer, so he's had some good spring training stats. Sean Newcomb, his strikeout numbers have been good, but he's been giving up a lot of hits. 15 hits allowed for him in 11 innings of spring training work. Jonathan Cannon, it looks like the White Sox are going to transition him into a bullpen role. He has only started one game this spring training. Again, like, spring training starts really don't mean a whole lot in terms of what you're actually going to be doing in the regular season. A lot of times you're going to have multiple starters pitch in the same game just because that's the game that some of these coaches want, the big league ready guys to pitch in, and then there are games that they want the minor league guys to pitch in. And he just, once again, command is an issue. 5 walks in 11 innings, and he's given up 2 home runs, 11 hits so far. So I see a world where Jonathan Cannon doesn't open on the big league roster. Anthony Kay, one of the White Sox free agent acquisitions, has been solid to this point in 4 starts. He's allowed 3 earned runs in 11 2/3 innings. He's had walk issues as well, though, 6 walks in that period of time, but 10 strikeouts as well. Guys that I am very impressed with so far, Brandon Eisert, 6 scoreless innings to this point in 6 appearances, so he's been really good. Jordan Hicks, he's not been good, but I'm hoping for the White Sox sake that he is. Jordan Leisure, who I've been on like nobody's business, has had a solid spring training. He's allowed 1 run in 6 appearances. Grant Taylor, he once again seemingly off to a rocky start. 4.05 ERA in 6 appearances over 6 2/3 innings. 3 walks, just 6 strikeouts to this point. Hasn't allowed any homers, but he's given up 9 hits in 6 2/3 innings, which is less than ideal. And then the local kid, the non-roster invitee, and somebody that I really hope does make the roster, Ryan Borucki, who is a veteran, but so far, 2 hits allowed in 5 innings over 5 appearances, 1 walk and 6 strikeouts, no runs allowed. I mean, he's been, I think, a really nice surprise so far in spring training, and I'm certainly hopeful that he is somebody that the White Sox are going to be able to put on the big league roster when the year begins. On the offensive side of things, the White Sox have a decent amount of people right now that are with teams in the World Baseball Classic, and somebody that has impressed in the World Baseball Classic to this point is Sam Antonacci, and he was great in the small sample that he was with the White Sox. He had 2 home runs and 13 at-bats with a 3.08 average, and so far during the World Baseball Classic, he's only hitting 182, granted a small sample size, but he's got a homer and 3 runs batted in, and this is somebody that I think is potentially going to end up making the big league roster. And I think that he's somebody that you look at what he's done over the course of the last year. And when he got called up to Double-A Birmingham last year, he was great. Hit 292 in 49 games, 1 homer, 25 runs batted in, but he had an on-base of 435. I think that he has the potential to be, as somebody that can play all over the infield, a Chase Mydroth with more power. And he's an Illinois kid. I mean, he went to college at Coastal Carolina, but he's from downstate in Springfield, and he started his collegiate career at Heartland Community College in Normal, which is near Peoria. So he is the hometown kid that I think White Sox fans would rally behind, and this is no disrespect to Chase Mydroth, but I think that the upside in terms of the power that you've seen from Sam Antonacci is a lot bigger than the upside power that you might potentially see from Chase Mydroth. And, Chase Mydroth at this point has not been great in spring training. He's hit 206 in 13 games and yet to have a home run. And granted, he's not somebody that you necessarily are expecting to hit home runs, but he's doing his job. He's getting on base. I mean, he's hitting 206, but his on base is 400 at this point. And I think that Chase Mydroth is one of the most valuable hitters in this organization just because of his ability to draw walks. And that's something that I think when you talk to White Sox fans everywhere, the inability of some of these guys over the course of years to draw walks, especially how a lot of players were developed, it just makes people like Mydroth, even that much more. Drew Baker, who the White Sox acquired in a trade last year with the Rays and the Matt Thaiss deal, has had a solid spring training. He's gotten a good amount of opportunities to get at bats, but I'm not sure necessarily if he's going to be somebody that makes the roster. Miguel Vargas has had a really good start to spring training. In 13 games, he's hit .308 with a homer and 2 runs batted in. So he has been really solid to this point, although he does have 8 strikeouts at this point in spring training. Braden Montgomery, I don't think he's going to open the year on the big league roster, but hitting close to .350 in 12 games, granted 23 at-bats, but 8 hits and 23 at-bats, small sample size, but still that's the type of sample that makes you go, ooh. And then I struggle to figure out what the White Sox role for Lenyn Sosa is going to be at this point, especially with the addition of Munetaka Murakami, because I don't think Lenyn Sosa is good defensively, and he's not going to be the first baseman. So is he just going to end up platooning at DH? At this point in spring training, he's been the White Sox best power bat. He's got 2 homers, 7 runs batted in, 10 hits and 34 at-bats. So the bat is there. It's just a matter of where do you put him. And maybe with the injury to Kyle Teel, that opens up more DH spots for him. Remember, you still do have to, quote-unquote, play Andrew Benintendi because of his contract. So Sosa's not an outfielder, and I don't think the White Sox necessarily feel as comfortable with putting Vargas in the outfield at this point, even though they can. So there's a lot of questions that I think are going to have to be asked about what Lenyn Sosa's role is, or if Lenyn Sosa is going to end up being somebody that they end up keeping or trading because they just don't have a spot for him. Luis Angel Acuna has had a really nice start to spring training as well. 13 hits and 28 at-bats. So if he's going to be your everyday center fielder, so far, I think the return on that deal has been good. But again, it's spring training, so you just, quite frankly, don't know. And then I wonder what the status is of non-roster veterans like Lamont Wade Jr. and Jared Kelenic, and whether either of them has a chance to make the roster. Kelnic's average has been low, but he has hit a couple home runs. So there's certainly an opportunity for one of those 2 guys to end up making the roster. Wade, I think, less likely than Kelenic, because I think Kelenic is much more valuable in terms of what he can do in the outfield, and I just don't think that Wade has been as good of a defensive outfielder over the course of his career that Kelenic has been. And, I saw Lamont Wade play a lot in San Francisco, and somebody that doesn't have a ton of power that they were playing at first base, and I just don't think that that's really the body type and the player profile type that you want at first base if you have options like Murakami and Sosa and, in a pinch, Vargas. So I don't think the likelihood of Wade making this team is very high, but I think that Kelenic has a very, very, very strong opportunity to actually make this team. And how this outfield is going to look on opening day, I think, is going to be fascinating. I have absolutely no idea what this roster is going to look like from a position player standpoint and from a pitching standpoint. There are certain periphery players that I'm just not sure about, and I think that the White Sox are so young. I just think there's too much at this point that can be interpreted from this team, but Austin Hayes is going to be one of your starting outfielders. Luis Angel Acuna is going to be one of your starting outfielders. In theory, Andrew Benintendi is going to be one of your starting outfielders, although I bet the White Sox hope that they could trade him if the opportunity presented itself. But, Andrew Benintendi is still a part of your team until he's not. And then there's also, another utility guy in Curtis Mead, who the White Sox got from the Rays in the middle of last year, and he has the opportunity to be that super utility guy on the infield if Brooks Baldwin is not going to start the year, although Baldwin, I think, more of an outfield possibility. You see, you just go through, the amount of guys in spring training that are getting at bats, and the amount of guys that look like 4A guys, and guys that have the potential to be on this team, but don't think are cornerstones of this team. And I just hope, for the sake of the development of this team moving into the future, that the guys that are young, that make the roster, are guys that the organization sees as pieces that will be a part of this team when they're competitive. And I've said that in regards to a lot of different people for quite some time now. And I'm truly, truly hoping that this spring training will result in the White Sox putting out an opening day roster that has guys that are going to stick for a little while. And there are guys that will make the roster that won't stick for a little while. Most notably the Jared Kelnicks of the world, who I think is just trying to revive his career. This is a former top 10 pick that was the centerpiece of the Robinson Cano trade and has essentially kind of crapped out over the last couple of years after one solid-ish revival with the Braves. So the good thing about being in the White Sox organization is that you have every opportunity to prove yourself, and there's nobody that is untouchable. I mean, there's truly, I think about it now in retrospect, there's truly nobody that's untouchable in this organization. So I'm hoping for the sake of the White Sox that they are going to put out a team that is going to surprise people. And I feel more confident about what they're going to do offensively than I am what they're going to do pitching-wise. And that just simply stems from me feeling that the White Sox are kind of not sure where to go in terms of their rotation. I think their bullpen, they got a lot of bullpen pieces, but I just don't know where they're going to go in terms of their rotation. And with Mike Vasil out, I think that takes some options away. I think that you're going to have Davis Martin, Shane Smith, Anthony Kay. I think once Eric Fetty gets ramped up, I think he probably ends up as one of your 5 starters. And then who knows for the 5th? It could be Sean Burke. It could be Mike Vasil. It could be Jonathan Cannon. It could potentially be somebody that we're not thinking about. But the White Sox have definitely got an interesting decision to make in regards to what their initial rotation is going to be. And, their closing situation, their bullpen situation seems to be set at the back end, but what's it going to be in the middle? Sir Anthony Dominguez, I think, is a great guy to bring in as a veteran closer, and I hope that they are in a position organizationally to where they feel like the younger guys that are going to be a part of this bullpen have the chance to become those closers and those setup men once the free agents and the higher price contracts of the veterans like the Hickses and the Dominguezes eventually move on. But again, that's looking way, way, way down the road. We've got a full 10 more days of spring training, and then we are going to figure out what the White Sox look like. White Sox baseball is less than 12 days away. I cannot wait. I hope you are as excited as I am. We will be back next week with more spring training news, hopefully some roster decisions, and just a whole lot of fun. This is Believe in White Sox on the Believe Podcast Network.